Hi there. This video is going to show you what I sort of described over the years of trading that I've been doing, and it's called sort of the 2 goals ahead principle. And it was a game between Celta Vigo, who were sort of heavy favourites, and they were playing in their first La Liga game of the season against newly promoted Leganes. And I backed a couple of half-time, full-time events, and I'd also backed 2-0 and 2-1. It was kind of 0-0 at half time, and I've just seen there I put a quick lay in of the 0-0 half time score, just in case either side did sort of nick a goal just before half time. That didn't happen, so I sort of incurred an extra sort of £5 liability on top of the sort of pre-match liability I got, which was sort of around about £34. And the video actually sort of started sort of around about half time. So, what I wanted to show you here was as the game progressed and it was still 0-0, and 0-0 was our sort of worst scoreline basically. It was possibly sort of a nearly 100% loss, as was 0-1. 1-0 was covered up to a point. Sort of around about sort of 70 or 80% of the liability was covered by the draw Celta Vigo in the half-time full-time market. 1-1 was okay, as we'll see in a minute. And this particular move I made here, backing over 2.5 goals. I looked at the sort of in-play stats, and there's quite a lot of chances going for each team, and at 1.17, that seemed a reasonable thing to do. So, I was also going to back 1-1 in the second half. Just waiting for the 2.5 goals to be matched. And what happens here, in what I'm trying to sort of show you really is that, if you're looking at sort of almost a total wipeout, then what you can do is actually sort of increase your liability, but very, very sort of cheaply. In other words, if you've got, so let's say, £50 liability, and you're going to, it's a potential, sort of full 100% loss, then sort of adding an extra £5 with the possibility that it could get you out of trouble completely with that extra bet, and it's cost you very little money. I've always sort of felt that that's a sort of part and parcel of the way we trade. So we're sort of on 50 minutes and it's still 0-0, and a lot of times I guess people will beginning to kind of get fidgety and a bit frustrated. They might start thinking, I better back 0-0 or better back 0-1 or something. So but stick to your plan. And my plan was basically going to be to do this sort of increasing liability. And what I did was, instead of backing 0-0 or 0-1, which were the danger scores, I backed 0-2 at 85s for £3. So I've got a £225 green there, and I'd also put a small sort of £5 on 1-1 at sort of 9s, knowing that if the underdog, which is Leganes, scored, then that 0-2 would come in sort of dramatically, and as you can see here, it's come into round about sort of 11s, 11.5, and I'm going to lay that for £10. And I've also got some green on the 1-1 scoreline. So, I've got sort of 2 scores there that I backed when it was 0-0. And that's both of those particular scorelines, are what I call sort of 2 goals ahead. So there you can see I've reduced that liability on the correct score market of, £30. And remember, I've got a £10 liability on this half-time, full-time market. I really wanted, Celta to actually sort of score a goal in the second half, and that would be covered, and that would give my profit because of the green I've got in the half-time, full-time. So that didn't happen, And this sort of backing of the 0-2 was a way in which, if the underdog scored, I could then reduce, my liability to, a very reasonable sort of amount. The 1-1, I'd also laid that for £10 as well, and looking at the way the green and the red was spread across sort of these sort of three markets now: correct score, half time, full time, and the over 2.5. I've got sort of a possibility that if it ended 1-1, I would end up with a very small loss, like about £4 or £5. Sorry, I forgot to mention what I'd also done sort of at half time was I'd laid Celta in the match odds market for £12, and that was actually going to cover the red in the half-time, full-time market. And there, with around about 10 minutes to go, it was reasonable enough just to sort of hedge that for sort of £11.20. Just in case, if Celta did manage to get 2 goals in the last 10 minutes, then at least I didn't have, an £11 liability on the match odds on Celta. So here we are. We're up to 90 minutes. I'm struggling here to a certain extent, but I've got the liability down to £15, and it was around about sort of 45, and I really just wanted a goal now from either side. So I just put an extra £3 on 1-1. Should Celta manage to equalise, and that would push me into profit there to around about sort of £15. If it went to 0-2, then obviously I'll be looking at around about £100. So you've got that sort of upside, potentially a jackpot of sort of £100 for a trade here, which was looking sort of very sort of dodgy indeed, and it only cost me sort of £3 to do that, and that was very little, really, a very small addition to the existing liability that I'd already got. Okay, the underdog did sort of take the lead after about sort of 75 minutes, wasn't it? And that 0-2 backing at 85s for a very small amount, £3, enabled me to lay it at sort of whatever it was. There we are, 12s for £10. So it's this 2 goals ahead thing. I mean, you can do it not only when your trade is in trouble, of course, but you can do it at any time in the game where you think that backing something cheaply, because there's 2 more goals that's sort of required, it can sort of work a lot in your favour. So that's something to kind of bear in mind for particular games when either the trade is going against you, as in this case, or indeed if you want to try and sort of add or maximise your profit when a trade is actually going your way. Just coming up to the last sort of dying seconds of the game. That second goal, either 0-2 or 1-1, it didn't happen, unfortunately. So it actually ended with an £18 loss from a total liability of sort of 44 £. So I was sort of happy enough with that, because I know that this particular kind of tactic does work, and when it does hit the jackpot, it's very worthwhile indeed.